Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast, the special season, 10 episodes where we're talking all about this very current topic, mental health at work. I'm very excited today. We have got a dear friend. We've done some work together in the past. We've known each other for a little while. It's Hannah Meredith. She is a health and wellbeing advisor for a company called MVF Global. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks, Petra. It's great to be here.
Super great to have you. I like how set up you are. You've got the working at home thing down.
Yeah,
if people aren't on video, check out the YouTube version because you'll see all the perfect books, and Hannah just knows what she's doing. So we got a couple warm-up questions just to get a flavor of who you are. First one, what has been, if you can think off the top of your head, the best piece of advice that you have gotten about your work or career? What's the best piece of advice?
I think actually we're probably going to come to this point a few times, but it's around not pouring from an empty cup. And I'm sure you probably said it to me at some point. You can't really help anyone until you're okay. So it's definitely sort of making sure your cup is full first before you're able to, because you can be obviously supporting people all day long, and if you're not feeling okay, that's a real drain on your energy and your mental health. So yeah.
That's a great one. And we'll go into what some of those details are. But absolutely, for those of us in the people teams, HR, health and wellbeing, who are now supporting teams and employees, but also managers, leaders, perhaps even advising CEOs in that level, it can really take a toll over time. What do you think is the impact just of this constant support that we need to give to other people?
Burnout for sure, and feeling completely drained. I definitely don't always manage to keep to the advice. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but I think it's really important to keep it in mind.
Absolutely. That's full on. So our second sort of warm-up question, was there anything that you needed to unlearn to better yourself in your career and sort of get to the place that you're at? What did you need to unlearn?
Everything, and I'm still unlearning it. So
you're still unlearning it.
Still a work in progress. There's just constant imposter syndrome. My job is quite a new role that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere, and I think especially 3.5 years ago when the role was created, there was a lot of what even is that? That sounds like a cool job, but what do you even do? You just organize massages, or so there's a lot of there's no sort of specific route into this role, and I got into it from lived experience, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. I think I'm constantly trying to unlearn those kind of behaviors of self-doubt, and trying to believe in myself and know that I can do the job. So
I love that. Unlearn everything. I think we need to do like a little meme on that just to get that on social media. What did you need to unlearn? And I guess putting yourself out there, because I've seen a little bit of your journey, you've sort of felt the feelings of self-doubt and that sort of thing, but showed up anyway, created a role. And it's fair to say MVF Global are on some of the top 100 places to work often, aren't they, on the Sunday Times list?
Yeah, we're number one.
You're like a few years in a row, right?
We've got top 5 the last few years that we've entered it, but this year we actually came first in February, so that was a great night.
Outstanding. Super amazing. So we really want to pick your brain about what are some of the things that have really supported MVF Global within your role to be on these lists, but equally, let's just talk about mental health at work. So we both, before we started recording, we looked at the news and we're like, holy shit, there may be a secondary lockdown or a level 2 lockdown in the UK. What did it feel like just to look at that again?
Awful.
Right.
It just feels like how can we do that? How can we do this again now? It's really daunting, because I think I'm not going to lie, the first time it happened, I think there was a little bit of like the unknown, and it's scary, but also it's like, it's a bit, it's a bit exciting. You're excited about the Zoom quizzes, and you're excited about, all these things that you're going to do, and, cooking loads of food and things like that. But this time it's just, I don't know how people, or how I will cope with it, to be honest. And I think it's just very confusing as well. There's just a feeling of like confusion of like, what exactly can we do? What can't we do?
That
because
uncertainty piece that
yeah,
just adds to the stress, right?
yeah, definitely, because the messaging's been so mixed, and it's just constant, and I try to avoid it because it's not been great to follow it, and I know that MVF will tell us the important things anyway. Um, but obviously, yeah, the latest report literally just came out, didn't it, before we were speaking? So I had
Sure.
to check
So our
that one
heads
out.
our heads still spinning, and we're wondering about
Mm,
birthdays and plans and kids,
yeah,
and
we
like,
need
can
to
we still do
cancel
something?
everything. Yeah, it's
Oh, so
really
it's
hard.
just deflating. Now, I know you and
Mm,
I have been in the mental health space for years, right? So I've been working in well-being and supporting your own company and me, wider companies to think about this topic. So we know that this is an issue already, right?
mm,
But now suddenly this issue is blowing wide open. So globally, companies are talking about it and thinking we now need to be seen to be doing something. You guys have been
yeah.
doing stuff for a little while. What do
Yeah.
you see as the impact on mental health, though, first of all? And then I'd love to go into what are some of the things that you guys have been doing.
Sure. Of the pandemic specifically, I
Sure.
think there's going to be lasting long-term effects, because not only has it exacerbated people who have already got like anxiety disorders, for example, um, people have not been able to get the treatment that they normally would, because they've not been able to access their doctors or hospital appointments. So it's going to have a huge, I think, long-term knock-on effect. And I do think there really needs to be extra support in there from the government for people suffering from mental health illnesses. But I think that we will also see a surge in people with new symptoms, from it, which is really, really sad.
Yeah, it's almost like the magnifying glass is on anyone who already has a
Mm,
predisposition or is even if they've managed it well, the adrenaline, the fear, the stress that's around us. And then really good point that we haven't actually heard much of yet on this podcast is access to services. So
mm,
so now perhaps waiting times are longer. Perhaps we know the NHS is inundated. So if you can't sort of afford to source your own care, you really might just be suffering alone.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just that point on the magnifying glass, I really think that's what's happened a lot, especially with the first lockdown. People were suddenly alone with whatever they might have been avoiding, or life has been typically very busy and you're just on this constant hamster wheel, and that was taken away for a lot of people. So um, you're going to see things are being brought to the surface, I think, for a lot of people as well because of it. So yeah, it's definitely, it's going to be hard, and I know people that are experiencing longer waiting times and that are not able to access support through the NHS. So that is where businesses do need to step in, I think, and offer that support.
So offer it sort of internally. I mean, many of us also had our routines that were sort of given to us,
Mm,
some at least part way. So this is the time you start work, this is your commute, this is the time you finish, that sort of hamster wheel, as you say. And now for many of us, if we are at home, we've got to almost have more agency over creating some of those ourselves, right?
mm.
Otherwise, things fall by the wayside and our own mental health suffers.
Definitely, yeah. And I think one of the things we did straight away when lockdown hit was sort of publish a lot of information and guidance and training on how to manage your day and how to make sure you're having that cut off time. Because even though I definitely didn't stick to it in the beginning of lockdown, suddenly you're working, there's no end to your working day. You're just picking up the laptop after dinner, so um, I think that's really important as well, to make sure employees know that they need to finish work, and putting in some clear like parameters around that, and meeting free times and things as well. Yeah,
Yeah, just
definitely.
to switch off and have those routines and have permission from your
Yeah.
employer to create those spaces. So talk me through some of the highlights of the things that you've done within your company, who you've brought in over the last 3 years. So I know there's been more reactive support that's needed to take place now in the pandemic, but I'm just curious because you guys are on those top lists of good
Yeah.
places to work. What are some of the things that get you on those lists? What have you brought in?
Sure. Well, we've had a multifaceted sort of wellbeing strategy in place that we launched officially to the business in 2018. But obviously, I've had my role, which is dedicated to health and wellbeing. That role was created sort of 3.5 years ago. So um, we have under that strategy and under the Be Well program, we've been running a lot of sort of physical activities as well, yoga, every type of exercise you can think of. We had an MVF club before lockdown, and sort of lots of free healthy food and nutritionist talks and things like that. And then in the mental health space, we started with an EAP, which is actually how I met you a few years ago, because you at the time came and introduced the EAP to us. And that was kind of our starting point. And then we've built on that. And in terms of mental health strategy, we started to do panel discussions, have people in sharing their experiences. We've had live theatre at our head office a few times. Fantastic.
Well, say more about that. I remember it was quite specific to the topic of depression, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic friend and colleague of mine, Chantel Doucette, who's an amazing writer. And she has written several pieces, but this piece is specifically about her personal experience going through depression. And it's incredibly confronting, and it's sort of almost a monologue. There's one other person in it, so it's very kind of intimate performance. And I think we've run it 3 times now for World Mental Health Day the last few years. And then we do like a panel discussion after that. And it's brilliant, and it really hits it home to people, I think. Being able to sort of see that in a kind of dramatic way, they can sort of relate to it, because it's almost like how you would relate to watching something on TV, or it's just in a different context, isn't it? So that's worked really well. And then I think, having different like lunchtime events and things like that, and lunchtime talks always works. And that sort of carried on for us now. We still do that, but obviously, as you know, because you did a panel discussion for us recently, we do those over Zoom. But I think we've been sort of in the space of raising the awareness for quite a while, for sort of 3 years, and getting people talking about it. And then we asked people to share their stories for the last couple of years as well for World Mental Health Day, which we had
what sort of format is that? Sort of videos, or is it getting together?
Written accounts, and they can be anonymous or otherwise, but a lot of people have chosen to do them non-anonymously, including myself. And that, to be honest, has had a huge impact on the culture, and how many people engage with the stories as well, because people naturally want to find out, they're curious about other people. So with the sort of events that you do physically, you might see a lesser turnout, sort of 50 people, something like that. But when you're doing the stories, you've got hundreds of people reading them, and then getting that different perspective, someone else's experience. And that obviously the experiences that people share are so varying, because there's just a full spectrum, isn't there, of how people can experience mental health. So the story sharing is something I recommend, but it can be quite triggering as well. So definitely make sure
put the support in place. I'm curious, so if a business listening, they're like, oh, this sounds amazing. First of all, you're investing in this topic with your role, as well as with a host of other things. And I'm really getting that it's not a one size fits all. So you're putting some variety out there of what's sort of possible for people. But was there any resistance from sort of leaders or managers to freeing their people up, or allowing them the space? When I know you got high pressure deadlines and workloads as well, what was there resistance? And if so, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I think in certain teams and departments, there can be a bit of resistance, especially when we're under the high targets and we're trying to hit, these big targets and things like that. So definitely, I think certain teams need things that they can relate to or engage with in a different way. So they might not be able to come up, to the Wellbeing Day, but they could do something else, or they could rewatch a recording later, that sort of thing. So I think it's important to think about different departments and different roles in the company and how they work, and what sort of pressures they might be under, and what sort of culture there is in those teams as well, and make sure you're kind of offering something for everybody to be able to access the same events, or at least something comparable, really.
Sure. And what about the culture of openness, I guess? So you've got the stories, you've got the way that people can communicate their experience. I know you have outsourced counseling and places where people can get support that way. Specifically now, if we come back to this pandemic Zoom era, do you find that it's more difficult to create those open spaces for sharing? What's the culture like? How comfortable are people being open about their stories?
I actually think we're getting even more open because, as you know, we've sort of partnered with Sanctus recently, and the turnout we saw for those events was really high as well. And I think it's quite normal at MVF now to talk about mental health, and I think although we don't see too many people reaching out to the mental health first aiders that we've got, there's 30 of us and we all talk about it in our teams, we all check in, so you kind of get a flavour, and they're all really are like, they're kind of championing mental health across the business as well, in every team, every department. So I think if anything, we've got more open, and the fact that our CEO at the start of lockdown, Michael, sort of stood up, and he was really keen to know, what are we doing for mental health? What more can we do? And that's how obviously we've been able to proposition, and get Sanctus in now, which is someone I've wanted to work with for a long time. Because Michael, it's really important to him, and he was one of the people that was super aware suddenly of his own mental health, and that everyone is going through this pandemic in a really difficult way. So I think that sort of senior leadership standing up and saying, this is important, we give you the time to go to these sessions, these are the resources that are available. We do like weekly update video talks with Michael, and he always is shouting out to the events that we're doing, and the Sanctus coaching and things like that. So I think that's important to make sure you've got that from the leadership as well.
Absolutely. And for people who don't know who Sanctus are, they provide one-to-one mental health coaching to a broad range of businesses, and are really, they really support community. I know James and George quite well. So we sort of partner often just because our ethos and vision is aligned, where we like talking about good mental health and that proactive approach, as well as, of course, when we're struggling, as many of us are nowadays. So let's talk about you, Hannah. I warned you. I'd love to know, like, what is your, you said earlier, you indicated that getting into this role was partly because of your personal experience and your personal story. How has mental health affected you? What's your personal connection to it?
Yeah, so it's really funny because, like, when I think about this, it's only the last few years, I guess, since doing this job, that I've sort of realised that I've probably had anxiety my whole life, but I had no idea. And actually sharing my story at MVF, kind of having to think about that and think about, when did these feelings start, and actually I can't remember them ever not being there. Has made me, sort of learn a lot more about myself, and that actually, I probably did have anxiety even as a child, essentially. So I grew up, I had a lovely upbringing, nothing, awful, but my mum had some mental health concerns. She's got, eating issues, and she wasn't happy. Her and my dad were having problems, and my dad wasn't around because he was actually a mental health nurse. So I had that connection early on with mental health, but it was never like discussed, like, oh, you might have anxiety, Hannah. Dad very much deals with people on who are very unwell. So it's a different end of the spectrum, I think.
Extreme end,
yeah. And I had started to, I think, from a super young age, I just thought I didn't like school, but I would hide under my bed so I didn't have to go to school. I barely went to school because I hated it so much. And I just thought, oh, I just don't like school, it's not for me. But when I started writing my story recently, and a couple of years ago now, but I sort of started to think, well, actually, that's not really normal. And I still have those feelings, and I think, essentially it's social anxiety, and I have, I've been prescribed some medication that I take occasionally when it gets bad, but it's not, something I have to take all the time. But I think just realizing that I didn't necessarily know that, and no one ever spoke to me about that as a child, or that might be what was going on with me until I was in my 30s, has really made me not really want anyone else to have to go through that, and just think, oh, there's something wrong with me, or it's just the way I am. I'm not really, I'm just not normal. because the more I think we can talk about it and educate people, and even children, that they might be feeling things, and that there are coping strategies and things that we can teach kids as well. It's made me want to work in it, and I've always been super passionate about well-being and health in general. But that's kind of more my link to mental health, really. And I think, seeing my mum, who's like nearly 60, and she's never really kind of dealt with anything. And she had a cancer scare last year, and she just she couldn't cope with it, because there's so much work that she needs to do by by her age, and there's things that she needs to deal with. And I tried to fix her and get
That's
her to
taking
do
a lot.
medication, and and I realized after that, I was like, do you know what, I can't do this. I'm just going to be there for you. I can't, trying to get her to have therapy, meditation, do the diet, everything. But I think the earlier we can, for me, I just don't want to get to that point where I'm, I haven't dealt with any of my stuff when I'm,
And you've
at
seen, I
that
guess,
age.
how
And
it can build up
yeah.
if we don't deal with it. So you talked about, I just want to get specific about some of the symptoms for you so people recognize what it could look like. So when you're younger, you didn't want to go to school. What were some of the other symptoms for you, for people who don't know much about anxiety?
I mean, intense feeling of panic and in your heart and your stomach at the thought of doing anything in front of people, or seeing people, even speaking to people. It actually got so bad for me before I turned 30 that I was having sort of paranoid delusions in the end. I sort of thought people were talking about me and didn't, hated me, thought I smell, all these things, because it escalated because I've been spending quite a lot of time on my own at that point. So I think now it kind of manifests in constantly my mind's racing, and my mind will go completely blank, and I can't think of anything. It's definitely still there, and it's something I have to kind of manage. And it's not over, that's for sure. But I don't think it ever is mental health. It's you just kind of move around the spectrum a bit, and hopefully find ways that you can manage it and live without it encroaching too much on your life, sort of thing.
Sure. So there's some self-awareness, understanding your own symptoms, what might be going on for you, and then finding the coping strategies that help you. And I imagine they evolve over time. But what are some of the things that work for you, that help you kind of manage it, or know when you're like, oh, I'm going a bit too far, I got to pull it back and look after myself?
It's funny because actually doing the opposite thing, so socializing, if I'm left to my own devices, things it gets spirals,
The
and it's
overthinking. Yeah.
So I need to see people, I need to talk to people for me to, it distracts me. So definitely, making sure I'm keeping in touch with people and socializing on some level as much as you can into this strange world that we're
Well,
in.
yeah, does that just make it so much harder? Like if you had habits around some kind of socializing to manage it.
Actually, I've noticed, because I was saying to you, we've moved house, and this house I'm all alone in all day, and actually, I need to watch that. I realized yesterday I had a bit of a bad day, and I was like, I need to make sure I'm going to, see people or having a call with someone at lunch, because if I'm not on calls all day, which I wasn't this week, I'm just left to my own devices, which I think isn't the best for me. But also exercise is massive, especially since, we've just been kind of stuck in one room essentially all day long, and then you're stuck in the house. Getting out, getting a walk, having fresh air, doing some exercise, trying to meditate. I find meditation really helps, but I don't do it enough. And when I do, it's almost a bit emotional, actually, because it's like, wow, yes, thank you. This is what you should be
I find that as
doing.
well. I
Yeah.
get a bit tearful if I
Yeah.
am able to sit with myself long enough and not be in distracting helping mode with other people. It actually has a real emotional impact for me. When you do meditate, what kind of stuff do you use? Is it just music? Do you do some guided stuff? What works?
Yeah, guided stuff works much better for me. I can sit down with my partner and meditate if it's both of us without guidance. But if I'm on my own, I find the app's really good. We've actually partnered with Headspace at MVF, so we're launching that soon. So I'll be making most of that. But I'm on Beachbody on Demand, and they've got this fantastic program on there, 30 days of Recalm or something it's called. So, and they're really good. They have like guest speakers on, a different one each day. So just try different things. I had the Calm app before, which was great. And I don't think one thing I've learned is that, not to be too intimidated by meditation. Like just 10 minutes is enough I find, just to calm my brain and set me
I
up.
love that.
For the day.
I find if I focus on my breathing, it's actually harder for me. But if I focus on sort of the body scan or a part of my body, that actually works better for me. So it depends what works for you. I know you've just moved in you haven't just moved in with your partner, you've been living together, but with other people. So you've moved in together. I've been with my partner now for about 18 months. And I find that I get post-traumatic stress disorder, and usually it's cool. I can manage it and it doesn't flare up. But I found that during the pandemic and perhaps the change of moving in, that I've had more sort of flare-ups of my own post-traumatic stress. What kind of, do you feel like my partner's had to step up to support me in ways that perhaps he hasn't had to before? Do you feel like there's an extra pressure in a partnership with the pandemic to support each other's mental health?
Definitely.
Yes.
I think also, I don't know, someone said to me, that if you make it through the pandemic, then you've got a good solid, you can make it through anything basically. And I think that's true. Like it's definitely not been easy, has it, for anyone, whether you're in a relationship or not. But I think it's definitely put extra pressure on relationships. And you need to be open with each other and, make sure you're communicating, I think, what you need and what's going to help. Because I think for my partner, bless him, otherwise he feels a bit lost. It's like, I don't know. So yeah.
Well, that's a good point. Like actually trying to give them insight or information on how they can help, because they often want to help, but are a bit like, oh, what do I do? So there's just that real openness.
Definitely. And I think if you're supporting someone as well, it's just as simple as asking, what is going to help you? What can I do? What do you need? And just trying to have that dialogue, because sometimes, when you're in sort of meltdown mode, as I call it, when I'm having a meltdown, you're not really, sometimes you're not ready to hear it, but just maybe, if I say to Joe, like, this is what might happen. And sometimes I can't see that it's happening as well, which is funny. Like it takes another person to go like, are you okay? Like, let's take a minute, So I think once, you get to know each other and you tell them sort of, what you need, it's a good start. Definitely.
It's a process though, isn't it? Of that information and trial and error in a way to see how to help. What about friendships, or, how can other people, because we often get that, right? So maybe that person isn't suffering with anxiety or depression or those other things, but they have friends or their family or their kids or, colleagues are struggling in some way. What do you think are the best ways to support others?
Well, I think it's really difficult, because I often over support people. And just going back to that point, you really can't pour from an empty cup. You need to make sure you're okay first. And it's really hard to do when you've got people sort of reaching out to you. But essentially all you can do is listen to people, really. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, most of us aren't, or you are. You're trained.
But even then, our training is to listen and empower others' solutions. So it's just an exaggeration of that.
Yeah, I think it can be scary. I think that's why it's so important that there's more of these conversations happening, and there's more awareness around mental health, because people are sometimes too scared to broach it or ask. But it's just really important just to ask, how are you? That's literally, it's as simple as that, and that can open up the conversation. So yeah, definitely just try to listen and be non-judgmental, obviously, and as supportive as you can, and empathy is key.
And it certainly helps if, as a business, you have places to signpost people to.
Yeah.
So where you do have the counseling or the Sanctus coaching or resources, the stories, it sounds like at least you've got that backup in your business. So for people listening, try and get your leaders to invest in or create spaces to effectively signpost, given the difficulty in getting support at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think mental health first aiders are fantastic. There's a lot of misconceptions about what they're there for. And I think you really need to make sure you're communicating clearly to the business, what their training is, what they're there for, and that they're properly equipped with the signposting. So if you haven't got internal stuff, make sure they've got really good external resources and helplines and places that they can signpost people to if they are having to support people. And EAPs are fantastic. They do a lot of things, but it's very it's very much in the reactive space. And I think if you can get some preventative measures in place, it's going to save you in the long run. And it's going to save a lot of people getting to the point where they need to have therapy, or it's at that end of the spectrum. If there's some preventative safe spaces that they can access support.
Absolutely focus on prevention, especially now when we're all in a little bit of crisis. So I'd love to just go into a bit of forward gazing for the future of workplaces when it comes to the topic of mental health. People are throwing around this title, the new normal, and this is the new way of the world. What are your thoughts? Do you think that we are forever changed as a workforce?
I mean, I hope so. I hope that we have learned something, because it would be a shame for all this to happen, just to go back to the way things were, because some things weren't working, and a lot of businesses weren't giving people the flexibility to work from home as by default, or to dictate what their working hours should be. And I think there's a lot we can learn from the pandemic. And I hope that we do carry on, in some ways, to allow more trust, I guess, in people to tell us what they need. And I definitely see things being different in the future. And I think what's happened with the pandemic as well is there's been like a huge awakening almost for mental health. You mentioned earlier we've been working this space for quite a few years now, and it feels like we've been banging the drum, and suddenly everyone is wanting to do something for mental health, or is super aware of it. So that needs to continue. That can't be just for now. That is where we've been trying to get the world to anyway. So I think all the supports and all of the things that have been built over this time need to carry on as the new normal, because that's what it should have been all along anyway. So
But I love that you're saying there's actually an opportunity in this. So there's actually some good that can come out of this, and not many people have mentioned the almost forcing us to learn how to trust each other within that remote kind of space, and realizing that we can be productive, and people maybe need slightly different things, but that conversation and openness, transparency is more important than ever.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's something good about it. What are you worried about? So as a well-being professional in your workplace, given that we may have another lockdown, some people are in isolation. What are your concerns? And I know this just happened this morning, but do you have any like, oh God, how am I going to do my job effectively? What are we worried about?
I'm super worried about people that are isolated. We at MVF, we've always rely on engagement surveys and things, but since lockdown we've started new sort of smaller surveys to find out exactly how people are doing. And there's a group of people that have identified themselves as really struggling to be working at home. It's unbearable for them for a variety of reasons. Either they're on their own, or there's building work, or they just can't cope with it anymore. And for those people, I'm super worried if the government says that they can't now access the office, because we made like a safe space for these people to access. So the implications of that for people that are really struggling already, I think are really worrying. So we'll be looking to put some extra support in for them somehow. We have to, so and just I think going back to what I was saying about worrying, the general overall mental health of everybody, and new conditions and new symptoms that people will be suffering from, and more delays with healthcare and being able to get support. It's really worrying, and obviously the world itself is pretty worrying right now too. So.
It is all a little bit worrying. So let's not end on the worrying note, but let's
end
think
on a positive note.
Well, I'd love to know, like, what are the top 3 things that you would say to other HR people teams, like the people who are in that internal well-being space, where their company, they have similar worries to you? What would you say are the top 3 things? You may not have all the solutions because you're figuring it out. We all are, right? We're all trying to figure it out. But what are the top 3 things you think they should consider moving forward?
Yeah. Obviously, definitely investing in some sort of support that isn't an EAP. So something where people can access a confidential space to talk about their mental health, I think is really a valid investment. And I don't know about the others. I think obviously making sure you're looking after yourself and your team.
I mean,
It's
it goes
really
without saying,
important.
but we're forgetting all the time. I'm forgetting all the time. I'm like, that person's need trumps my own. And they're in crisis, so I'm gonna not do the exercise today, or I don't have time for meditation. I gotta be right. And then 3, 4, 5 days in, I think it's a shorter and shorter space of time now when we're feeling the impact ourselves. So I think that's a key one. How are you prioritizing yourself and telling people that you are? I think is super powerful as well. Where you tell them, hey, I'm taking my lunch break to do Beachbody on demand, or the one that you do. I do the HIIT and the body pump now. I've got but I've also got like a weight bar now, so I'm doing body pump in my living room.
Love it.
But that sort of leading by example piece, I think, is really
we
coming
have to
strongly.
Definitely, it's really important. And I was saying to you earlier, we've been non-stop people teams since March, and it's not going to let up, because every time there's a new scheme, or there's some new legislation, it's constant. And we have to make sure that we're filling our cup first. And our fantastic CPO, Ange, actually has introduced something called the Wellbeing Wake Up to our team. So we don't have to start till 10, to make sure in the winter months we've got time to get outside or do something for our wellbeing in the morning. So things like that you can introduce, where you're giving people some time that's specifically for them and for their well-being, is it's going to cost you something in time, but we shouldn't really be measuring people on the time, the hours that they're putting in anyway. So we should be measuring output, right?
Right. And the return on investment of giving people that trust, that space to invest in themselves, doesn't actually cost you anything. But the return on investment on productivity, loyalty, all of these things is huge.
It's been a game changer for us, for our team. And like, just being able to have that extra time, and then you do so much more work, you feel so much more productive in the day. And let's be honest, generally, no one's clocking off on the dot at 5. Most people are staying until they get done what they need to do. And I think just making sure people have that time is something that most businesses could actually do without any financial investment needed.
I love that. So if that's the first step you take, is just create some time for your people, get open about your own mental health. And I think the title of this episode is Fill Your Own Cup Up. That's quite a title, but I think it should be. Hannah, thank you so much for your time and your ideas. Thank you so much.
No worries. Great to be here. Thank you.